All right.
Speaking of brands.
So let's continue this morning with another great speaker. He started his journey as a copywriter in financial services before founding Mutiny Branding in 2012. For a decade, he has led his creative team to help B2B tech companies break through with bold and outstanding brand storytelling. His approach to leadership, business, and life is heavily influenced by the lessons he learned as an ultramarathoner as well as a trail runner. Charles has tackled, and listen up, the Bigfoot 200, the Run Rabbit Run 100, the Rim to River 100, as well as numerous 50-mile races. Kind of exhausting just to think about those races, but for Charles, this particular mindset is exactly what helps him see every single challenge and obstacle as a growth opportunity. So let's welcome this strategic architect who runs marathons and transforms companies. Please welcome Charles Squire, everybody.
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks, everyone. Well, what an act to follow. New York Times, their T studio. They're pretty awesome for those of you who missed it. But so we're going to talk story again, like they did, but go a little bit under the hood about brand story and how to unstick it.
Okay. Pointing at the.
Okay.
Yep.
Right. So. Again, my name is Charles Squire. I'm co-founder of a branding agency called Mutiny. We're based in New York, so I've been, like Michelle outlined, I've spent the past 20 years as a writer-strategist, focused on brand storytelling for tech startups and B2B enterprise with a lot of fintech thrown in there. So it's great to be here and have the opportunity to share some of my thoughts. I want to start with a couple questions. You don't have to raise your hands or anything, just maybe think about it, nod your head. First, if you ask 5 people at your organization what it stands for, would you get 5 different answers? Question number 1. Question number 2, do you currently have multiple versions of your presentation deck on your drive and trying to find the right version? Takes like half the day.
Right.
I feel seen.
So that's all the questions. So if you answered yes to either one, you're in the right place. I'm glad we're all here for the same thing. So today I'm going to speak on what is a brand story, is yours stuck, why does it matter, and how to unstick it. Brand story seems to be everywhere in 2025. For good reason. Some of the most world successful brands are embracing story, notably Notion, which recently announced an official storytelling team. So with storytelling in the headlines, hopefully you'll find my talk even more relevant today given the rise of brand storytelling, especially as organizations may be shifting focus, competition spins up faster than ever, and your brand story competes with millions of others. Okay, what is brand story? But before that, let's take a step back a minute and ask, what do stories do? We know stories do a lot of things, but today we'll focus on how stories stay with us. And when I say story, I mean brand story, but I just want to shorten it. So we're going to focus on how stories stay with us. They stay with our organizations, which can be good or bad, and how that impacts how our brands can move forward. So stories are sticky. That's one of the reasons they stay with us. A good one could be a rallying cry that unites, that drives us forward, sends a strong signal to your audience, to the market. A bad one, not so much. Both can stay with you, sometimes longer than you'd like. Why are stories sticky? It's because we're wired for narratives. Here's some facts to support that. Stories are 22 times more memorable than raw data. They release oxytocin, a trust hormone. Brands with narratives see 30% higher engagement. And there's something called mirror neurons that activate empathy for a better brand connection. So stories are powerful. And assuming those statistics are true, we should try to think of brand storytelling, which again, I'll refer to as storytelling today, as strategy. Storytelling is strategy. It's the brand foundation. So storytelling is everything from the team to the typeface. So it's not just the words, it's how you present your brand in a unified, strategic manner. And it all has to work together for it to work. So stories can drive us forward, or they can hold us back. This is why you need to actively manage your story. You need to check in with it every so often. Actively manage it. Make sure it not only represents who you are today, but that it's resilient enough to help you get you where you need to be. Because if it doesn't, the story may be stuck. So, is my story stuck? That's what we can ask ourselves. I'll use an example here from Napoleon Dynamite. This is Uncle Rico, stuck in the past of being a star high school quarterback, but now he lives out of a van. So it's an edge case example, of course, but that's what can happen if you kind of try to live within your old story. So, stuck story. If you have a feeling that your brand is stuck, brand story is stuck, here's some steps you can take. So we'll talk about how to know when you've outgrown your story, how to mobilize your team to evolve your story together, and how to get the new unified story out to what we're calling the carriers. And then we'll illustrate all of this at points through the lens of a recent client of ours, a fintech client called Versatile. So Versatile, fintech client, they're in the consumer financing space. They run in the background of what we can call point of sale financing. So instead of going to say you want to buy what they call a high ticket item, you're at a furniture store, or you need to get a roof replaced, or get a new treadmill. If you needed financing, if you couldn't put it on your credit card, you didn't have the cash on hand, you might have to go to the back room and get the hard sell from the guy behind the desk piled with papers filled with small print. So Versatile created this platform a few decades ago where you could do it, from a screen. So it eliminates a lot of the trepidation that you have about making a big ticket purchase, having the guy behind the desk check your credit score, saying yay or nay, and there's that element of shame involved. So they were really good at what they did. But so they're innovators in the space, but their first innovation was the credit kiosk many years ago. So that story stuck with them. It's a great technology, but it's a dated technology, which made them look dated. So even the CEO would go to a sales conference, and they would say, "Oh, you're the kiosk guy, right?" And he was like, "No, we've actually, since then, we have this like omni-channel platform that connects lenders like big banks to retailers to consumers, and it's this huge value network that no one else has created, and we do it really well." But he was stuck with that story, even though they've moved on. And no one wants to be the kiosk guy. So the data story stuck with Versatile is a double-edged sword. When you're known for something in the past, and that something stays with you, can limit your growth in other people's eyes. So in effect, their brand story got left behind, so they needed to take control of their story, but they didn't know where to start. So the Versatile website itself, it was, as you can see, very functional. They probably cut and pasted a lot of this from a PowerPoint deck, which is fine when your internal creative resources are very limited. So then you would lean into your sales team to close the deals, and they would make up for the fact that your digital presence just was stuck, basically. But this worked up to a point, because you can't scale the sales team, these one-on-one conversations. So if you happen to be a bigger client and you would have the Versatile founder talk to you, or the CEO or the CTO, and And if you were, as an audience, if you're fully conversant in retail financing technology, which not many people are, there might be at some point in the conversation, depending on the level of your expertise, where a light bulb will come on, there would be a, oh, I get what you do, you provide something that no other platform can, and then the conversation could move forward. But you had to get that conversation, and once you did, sometimes it took too many words to describe their value, which founders have a problem with that sometimes, and it didn't happen every time. So one-on-one sales strategy, not scalable. It didn't get them to where they wanted to be, to where they deserve to be as an organization. More importantly, it wasn't helping them scale as fast as their investors wanted them to get, as fast as their partners, as fast as potential hires wanted them to be. So that created this cascade effect for them. Even worse, the CEO actually told me this is the response he would get for a lot of these conversations. I still don't know what you do. So naturally, the conversations more or less come to an end there. So these investors, partners, potential hires, they went looking at other technology, other roles, other partners, technology that wasn't as good as Versatile, but were better designed. They had a better website, and together that told a better story, which these people can get behind. So this is important, especially, I'm getting a little in the weeds here of enterprise, but as buying groups grow and software purchases are being scrutinized more closely, Versatile was hitting the storytelling wall. So the issue was, how could they introduce a universal story into consumer financing technology to buying groups who might not understand the industry lingo? How could they avoid eyes glazing over? And Versatile's challenge isn't unique. You know, we've focused on similar challenges with other technology clients. Again, they're founder-led, engineers hyper-focused on building what they did best, but their brand story didn't represent the Versatile of today. So they weren't the kiosk company anymore. Their innovation outpaced their story, and their story was left behind, which was leaving them behind. So they lost the plot. They were stuck. Story was inside them. They just didn't have the words or the time or the toolkit to sit down, bring the organization together to get sign off and craft that universal narrative, to create a foundation in brand story that described who they were and what they offered that could be customized also to speak to the tech side of the building as well as the C-suite when they're talking to customers, that effectively express their value to every participant in their value network. But they didn't. Instead, they kept iterating. Multiple decks, multiple narratives. Everything was getting fragmented. The storytelling was getting worse. So a lot of fintech, a lot of enterprise talk here. I wanted to have some kind of intermission, I guess, about if there's a battle between better product versus better story, which one would win? So we want to pit story against product and see what happens. So let's talk, say, a tale of two Kias. So Kia launched its rebrand in 2021. It included a new logo, new slogan, movement that inspires, something big and aspirational. And the transformation reflected a shift for them as product to more electric vehicles or future mobility solutions, in an attempt to leave behind their old image of a, cheap, pretty good, but kind of inferior car, to something more reliable and future forward. So in the battle of product versus story, and this is top line. So despite continued bad reviews about the reliability of Kia's future mobility solutions, these new cars, sales still grew despite the bad reviews that Kia's were in the shop a lot. So story wins, power of story. So what does this mean? It can mean a lot of things, including people commit to the brand they believe in. And I'd say Kia did a good job of that. Whether it's a car, a candidate, a subscription, a donation, or tuition. We think Kia is a good example of creating an actionable connection of value through story. Okay, have I outgrown my story? Is my story stuck in the past? We could ask ourselves that. maybe it's perfect 10 years ago or 10 months ago, but you've made moves, you've evolved, you've released new products, you've added services teams, you've strategically pivoted, you've made acquisitions. Whatever it is, your existing story, your existing one is not who you are today, but the world doesn't know it yet. So in conversations, you and your team may be testing new versions of your story on the fly, just to see what sticks. But if your supporting communication channels don't match that story, there could be a disconnect, which could cause issues down the line. Your presentation decks, emails, website, they may start to seem a little off if your story's outdated, like they're stuck in amber. It's kind of like if you meet a relative or a family friend you haven't seen in years, and as you're speaking to them, you get that feeling that they see the old you, and you're saying to yourself, but I've changed, but they don't know that. People see you through the lens of your brand story, so it has to connect, it has to resonate, it has to be up to date, and if it doesn't, your audience may move on. So let's go over 4 warning signs that you've possibly outgrown your story. 1, you've evolved, but your story hasn't. 2, the industry sees the old you, which kind of pushes you sometimes to over-explain yourself or overcompensate in conversations. Maybe in worst case, apologize and adjust your narrative depending on the day, on the fly. Number 3, your teams may go rogue, creating their own brand story, like just kind of slipping in new slides into their decks, making social posts, emails, or even conversations, day-to-day conversations where they're kind of riffing on who you are today, but there's no universal story behind it. So you can also start to see red flags that indicate your organization is no longer a part of the conversation, and which means it's getting left behind. So why don't organizations change their story? If story is so important, why don't they just take the next step and do it? So different answers. Here are just a few, and all of them have merit. Don't have time, I don't see the value, it's hard, politics, it's risky. So we could focus on risky. Brand timelines are filled with famous failures. It can end companies, it can end careers, which is why I would recommend you use a trusted brand story framework if you choose to go down that path. Whether it's an outside facilitator or even a book to help lead you through this storm, this fog of war, to get organizational consensus from key stakeholders and then get you to where you want to be. But of course, it could still go wrong. A stale story can sneak up on you. And the longer you wait, the more stuck your brand can get, and you get left behind. So, key lagging indicators that your story is stuck. Lost sales, lost hires, lost growth, lost direction. So, versatile story was told by engineers, by the CFO, by the founder, a lot of disparate points of view. But you have to remember here that everyone in your organization is a storyteller, not just the CEO. I mention this because you hear that sometimes the CEO is the chief storyteller. That's true, but that's just one person. Whether you like it or not, your brand story is being told probably by more people than you prefer, in just as many different ways, in elevators, hallways, the dinner table. So the story changes depending on who tells it. The CTOs, they talk engineering. CFOs talk ROI. CEOs or founders talk vision sometimes. Blanket statements, but we find that there's truth to that. So with Versatile as example, each role was telling their story through their own lens, which we learned from extensive stakeholder conversations that we put on that I could talk about later. So each role focused on what they thought mattered, whether it's a new feature, a new add-on, service, or a new customer case study. So I won't read through these, but it's just an example of Versatile's story told 3 ways before we engaged with them on this brand story project. They're not terrible versions, but they're very corporate speak, very boilerplate. They're hitting all the keywords. There's no aha moments, no surprises, nothing too aspirational. And taken together, it all becomes modeled, your universal story. Not very actionable. Honestly, they're word salads that kept them stuck. So the solution is to tell a universal story, the universal brand story. Why is it important? A universal message conveys a unified front. And without that universal story, the team will tell it through their lens of understanding, this like N of one, as we've seen with Versatile, which can come into conflict with the other versions, which causes confusion, lost opportunities, and not enough growth. So putting this in a Venn diagram, universal story, the question mark in the center, that's what we were looking for when we engaged with them. So what's that universal story that could be told by those three roles, the CEO, CTO, CFO? So it needed to have wiggle room for slight variations, but still basically say the same thing. So the universal story applied to Versatile's network, their platform that created. They needed to have a story that spoke to lenders, retailers, and investors. And then you could double click into, the universal story, how it's delivered, different channels, face-to-face, digital platforms, media partnerships. So that was the charge. That was our job. So you have to remember that active ownership and management of your universal story is important. And that digital platforms play a large role in storytelling. You probably all know this. 61% of B2B buyers prefer a rep-free buying experience, whether it's a generational thing or just the way it is now. So there's more online research before making a decision. So in a way, your universal brand story becomes like the tip of the sales spear. So how do we get a universal brand story for Versatile? I'll tell you. So we created a framework. We have our own process for that. There are a lot of foundational frameworks out there. The secret, again, is to find one that speaks to you, that has a proven track record, and that you're willing to follow all the way through. And then you need to not only trust the framework, but make sure everyone follows it once you have it. So, top line steps for creating an effective brand story framework, according to Mutiny. Find the motivating insight where you want to go. Identify the barrier. Align on your ambition. Evangelize the narrative. Then craft and deliver the message. So find the motivating insight. So with Versatile, and as part of our process, we like to spend a couple weeks speaking to key stakeholders, the founders, team members at all levels, not just the C-suite, the people in the trenches, the sales team, customers, thought leaders, these external experts, if we're able to connect with them, just to get a whole holistic view of Versatile, the competition, and the landscape, so we could start crafting that universal brand story with a better understanding of the white space as well. So we spoke to key Versatile stakeholders. Just a few of their quotes that we worked with. So you speak to the story carriers and why they're explaining the brand's value the way they are, even if it's off in left field, even if it's very disparate. You want to get their point of view. We find that that's really important. After that, you speak to your story receivers. How are they responding to your story? So customers, for example. Those are quote complaints or the voice of unmet needs. So it's important to pay attention to any negative ones, especially to find out what the unmet need is and to craft that story accordingly. Your story also has to live through words and actions. It's not just words on paper. Like I said earlier, your whole team needs to follow through as best you can, living the brand story as you craft it. You need to find the truths, identify the unelevated truths that can help the story stay true as you're crafting it, as you're delivering it across different channels, and also make it easier. And this also makes it easier for everyone to stay true to the story. Next, for a framework, identify the barrier. You need to identify the limiting story. This means you identify the limiting story, and then from there you can start to dislodge, break apart the old perception. So, what's holding my story back? It helps to answer that question. We do it during stakeholder interviews, and it helps us really craft a strong narrative. Okay, the barrier holding you back, told in a diagram. So what's holding you back from where you are today so you can get to where you want to be? So next, when creating our framework, you need to align on ambition. It means replace the old story with an aha or breakthrough moment that has to come with a solution from, in this case, from Versatile. Must connect to people internally and externally at their role, at their specific role and level. And then next, you need to evangelize the narrative as it's coming together. You need to give it back to the storytellers. Once it's in a good place, give it back to them, so then they can start feeling comfortable carrying the message. And it's a kind of stress test as well. They can come back to you. You're like in beta. If you do it internally, they can get back to you and say, well, we tried this in this meeting with this bank, and they responded to this type of language, but not this. So we had time to kind of adjust accordingly. So mobilize your team to carry your story. So we're near the end of this framework now. You need to craft and deliver the message. So with that universal story, we came up with just a one line. Designers loved it. It's called Credit Optimized. It's fintech, so it may sound a little dry, but it really spoke to all the different levels of audiences that Versatile needed to communicate with, and I'll try to explain that. So, credit optimized. It was clear, concise, multifunctional, and by double-clicking into it and looking at it through different persona filters, it could be a flexible narrative jumping-off point, depending on the target audience or role, depending on the type of content or the platform as well. So, again, Credit Optimized speaks clearly to different partners in Versatile's value network as well. So, we'll just dive into their audience, what it means for them. So for retailers, it means customers with a more diverse range of credit histories can walk through the door with more confidence. They can purchase what they need with payments that work from them, which drives loyalty and sales for the retailers. So for lenders, big banks, they could offer more accessible loans to a broader range of customers, which builds a connection of trust. So those customers may come back to them to get a checking account, to get a mortgage, that kind of thing. So lenders appreciated that. Something else that lenders we found, and I think in general in the fintech industry, is that lenders, the big ones, are slow moving for good reason. They might be hesitant to invest in their own technology, so they do partnerships with fintech companies. So it gives them this halo effect, this aura that makes them look good to their own audiences. So Versatile was definitely doing that for lenders by optimizing credit. So another part of our process is we want to make sure the universal story is flexible. So I won't go through these, and I can share out this deck later if anyone wants. They could email me. So this is a stress test too, just to make sure the story works. We do elevator pitches according to persona. It just shows the flexibility of a strong brand story, so it could be customized, it's resilient, for different personas, but stay unified and grounded to the universal story. So our team is full of word nerds, so they love doing this kind of thing, including me. What we also do is we create a messaging toolkit, a style guide, kind of like an end deliverable for them, for the client. So the client, if they want to do so, they could take these assets as a toolkit, and then they could even feed them into an LLM with the right prompts. So it could be like someone at an earlier talk today was saying, could be like an agent, like a style guide agent that gets new employees on board, and it keeps everybody, including our employees, keeps them honest and helps them stay on brand. So we develop a toolkit, like the data, the words, the language, that could be, I think, distributed pretty quickly versus, with LLM. Okay, so we're nearing the end here. So the result for Versatile, with their brand story project that we did with them. Their brand story was unstuck. A new story, new design language, and a new website. They facilitated more conversations. There were more aha moments with really big potential clients. And so we got really good feedback, which was satisfying. I mean, it's a dry industry in a way, but when you really work to find that brand story, you get like points of empathy, like for the customer, for example, that you could really pull out, and it helps make a connection with your messaging. So we were able to do that with Versatile. Just some more. We did their website, their design as well. We have an example of a one-liner here they could use for, a LinkedIn header for elevator pitches, for example. So they had clarity now led to better meetings, better recruiting efforts, and better sales. And then finally, Versatile's ultimate goal, they had been bought by a private equity company. I didn't mention that. And the private equity company brought us in to kind of repackage them with their brand story. And within months of launching the rebrand, Versatile was as they wanted to be. They were purchased by Synchrony Bank, which was a big win for them, and it was the goal they had aspired to, and we're happy to help them with that. So obviously we all have different goals here, whether it's growth, a strategic pivot, or an acquisition spree, or sale. No matter what they are, sticking your brand story should really help you get there. So your story needs to step up, especially as storytelling scales. The more customers using the web first before a one-to-one conversation, before making a large commitment, definitely needs to step up. You need the unified message built on a solid foundation that your team can rally around, that cuts through the doubts, the questions, the noise, and leads to your preferred outcome. So words matter, your message matters, and in an environment where there's more competition, more screens, more voices, more layers of approval before a commitment or sale, a well-told brand story can move you forward. Without it, your audience may move on. So no matter where you are with your brand's journey, it's worthwhile to take a look at your brand story, make sure it's living up to who you are and who you want to be as an organization. So hope this talk, the client case study, can act as a universal example to help you and your organization and stick your brand story no matter what industry you're in. So thank you. Just want to thank you all for coming, Evolving Web, and sharing what I know. So if I could leave you with anything, it's to make sure your brand story lives up to all your hard work. Thank you.